everyone. It's Michelle Caruana from Play Cafe Academy and Profitable Play. And I know that you're probably used to hearing me talk all things business and operations and profit and marketing on this channel. But I wanted to take a few quick minutes because I'm not an expert in this area by any means and talk about something a little bit more personal. It still has to do with business ownership, but it's definitely something more on the personal side. And I wanted to talk about it on this channel because prospective owners come to me with this question all the time, whether it's in my Instagram DMs or whether they're emailing me or whether it's in my membership Playmaker Society. This is such a common fear and a common concern among prospective owners that I really wanted to take a minute to address it publicly because you might be afraid to ask this question, whether you're afraid to ask it yourself kind of subconsciously or whether you're afraid to personally message me about it because marriage is such a delicate situation. And I'm going to use marriage as kind of like a blanket term, but just know that I could be referring just as easily to any interpersonal relationship. So it could be your spouse or partner, it could be a parent, it could be a friend, it could be a business partner, it could be anything. But because my experience was with my husband, who, I'm married to, I'm going to speak from experience, but just know this is also true of any of those relationships that I mentioned, whether or not you're married. So the question that a lot of prospective owners kind of come to me with is, or rather concern or fear that they come to me with is they usually say something like, hey, Michelle, I really want to open this type of business, whether it's a brick and mortar or whether it's a mobile play business, whatever the case may be. They'll say, Michelle, I really want to open this type of business, but I don't want to work 24/7. I don't want it to cause too much stress or too much friction between my partner, spouse, whatever, and I don't want it to affect my kids' lives too much. I don't want to have to be completely chained to the business all the time. What is your advice? Because that's my biggest fear. And again, I'm only going to talk a few minutes about this from my experience because I'm not an expert, but in my experience, whatever you have happening in that relationship, so communication wise, trust wise, partnership wise, it's going to be amplified like times 100 by business ownership. So if you have poor communication or struggle with communication issues, if you have trust issues, if you struggle with division of roles or duties or responsibilities, like I said, that's going to be amplified, not just like by 2 or by 10, it's going to be amplified by 100% or times 100 by business ownership. So my husband and I, when I first opened my business, we were in a really good place personally, but I got pregnant with my second child right after we opened. I had just left my really well-paying corporate job that I got a master's degree for, that I worked really hard for. I decided to leave that job to open my business. And like I said, I got pregnant unexpectedly with our second child pretty much immediately after we opened. And that pregnancy was a lot more difficult. The birth was a lot more difficult. I needed an emergency C-section. My child was born with special needs. He had to be in a body cast for a really long time. So even though we were in a good place financially and personally, all of these factors that we could not anticipate when we signed that lease really caused a huge issue. And our issue was not necessarily, again, in our relationship as husband and wife, but it was more so my transition from, corporate 9 to 5 worker to business owner. Because when I was working a corporate job, I had no problem dropping the kids off at daycare. I had no problem asking for help making dinner or ordering takeout when we needed it. I had no problem asking for help if I needed to go run errands on the weekend. But once I left that job, once I didn't have a clearly defined role, once I was responsible for, my own actions as business owner, I didn't have a boss looking over my shoulder. I didn't have a salary. I didn't have any black and white, task list I could depend on. Once I made that transition from 9 to 5 job to business owner, I have to be honest, I really struggled with it. And whereas I felt comfortable asking for help before, I no longer felt comfortable. So the line was really blurred for me between stay at home mom, because technically my kids were now with me all the time. I pulled them out of daycare, which I probably wouldn't have done as quickly had I known how difficult and how stressful the opening process can be. And, training employees, all that stuff. I had to do all that stuff with a toddler on my hip, and, I got pregnant in the process. So the line between stay at home mom and business owner was really blurred for me. So I felt like I had to do everything child rearing related, and also open this business, hire employees, come up with systems, establish my revenue streams, build a website, find retailers, negotiate leases, find locations, establish partnerships, get funding. I felt like I had everything on my shoulders. And because I felt like, I didn't have a steady paycheck, I wasn't providing for the family like I had been previously, I just couldn't dig deep and find it in myself to ask for help. And that is no fault on my husband whatsoever. He would have gladly stepped in and helped. However, I don't know if it was pride. I don't know if it was just, again, confusion between my past role and my, the role that I was in at that season. I just couldn't ask for help. And that caused a lot of resentment. It caused me to internalize a lot of my anger and a lot of my stress. And I found myself, especially not just in the opening process, but throughout that entire first year, I found myself constantly thinking, like, gosh, this business could be so much better if only he would offer to babysit the kids once in a while. And I don't mean babysit, I mean, like, take a day off work and watch them, or, take them out for the day alone. I don't mean babysit. I know dads don't babysit, but he was working a lot and traveling a lot of the time. So I found myself thinking, gosh, this business would be so much better, more profitable. This business would be running so much better. My team would be happier if only he would do X, help me make dinner, take the kids out alone, give me some time to do things on the weekend, instead of, always doing things as a family. However, I internalized all of it. I never communicated it to him. I just kind of expected him to read my mind and see everything that I was going through and just automatically spring to my rescue. But he was kind of dealing with his own stuff, because all of a sudden we went from two six-figure incomes to one. And that was very, very stressful. We literally cut our income in half until, of course, we started making more consistent revenue from the indoor playground. But it took a while, because even though we were profitable from day one, we kind of talked in advance about how we wanted to pay back our loan as quickly as possible. So instead of taking owner's compensation those first 2 years, we put everything back into our loan, because our loan repayment term was 7 years, but our lease was only 5 years. And we went into this business knowing that we wanted to sell after 5 years. I knew that as soon as my son was too old to play in the play area, that I wanted to pass the torch. I didn't want to do it anymore. So it would make no sense to continue paying that loan for 2 extra years after our lease. So we just didn't want that monthly loan payment looming over our heads every single month. So instead of paying ourselves, we put everything back into repaying our startup loan from the beginning. So we didn't have that same income that I was making for the family. So while I was over here expecting him to, jump in and save me, he was wondering how we were going to, continue keeping up with our lifestyle on 50% of the income that we previously were. So it was really difficult. He wasn't communicating to me. I wasn't communicating to him. And again, it just caused this resentment to build up until we eventually had to sit down and say, at the end of that first year, maybe like 18 months in, like, are we going to do this? Because, at this point, it was either the business or our marriage. And luckily, we found a way to make it work. We found a way to communicate. But that first year was really tough. And a lot of people don't make it out of business ownership with one of two things, either their business or their relationship. Again, whatever relationship you have in your personal life that means the most to you. So I consider myself very lucky that we ended up working it all out after a couple really tough years. But I'm not going to, sit here and look at you and say that it was easy. It was really hard. before I figured out the systems that I needed in my business so that I could step away and be present in my house and in my relationship and with my kids, while I was constantly scrounging and fighting for every single sale every single day, constantly on social media, constantly having to put out fire after fire with my team. Until I figured out how to stop doing all of that, and until I found my proven, you know, formula for success in this industry, like I said, I'm not going to say that it wasn't difficult. It was extremely difficult. And that's one of the reasons why I created my program, Play Cafe Academy, because I've seen what this industry can do to individuals, what it can do to couples, what it can do to business partners. I've seen dozens and dozens of lifelong friendships, even sisters, completely cease their relationship, stop talking, sever ties completely because of how stressful business ownership in general can make those relationships. And I didn't want that to happen to anybody else. So once I figured out that success formula, I wanted to share it with as many business owners as possible so that they didn't have to struggle and fight and cry and internalize everything for years like I did, so that they could go into this with a completely clear vision and know exactly what steps to take so that it doesn't feel like they're just going down this dark tunnel alone. Again, I'm very specific in my program in that I say, okay, this is your starting point. Yes, it's going to be really stressful. Yes, it's going to be really busy those first couple months, but here's exactly what you're going to do. First, you're going to do this. Next, you're going to do this. Next, you're going to do this. And I provide all of the templates and resources and downloads and checklists and standard operating procedures and training manuals that I spent years and thousands of dollars and thousands of hours creating because, again, I don't want anyone to have to struggle like so many owners did and do to this day, including myself. So, again, it is really difficult, or I should say, it can be really difficult, but it doesn't have to be that way. And I wish that I had a program like my own when I was getting started. I would have paid any dollar amount to avoid those years of stress because it really robbed me of my newborn days with my second child. Because even when I was nursing, when I was doing those midnight feedings, when I was, supposed to be soaking up those newborn snuggles, instead I was answering emails, I was hiring employees, I was dealing with issues, I was talking to vendors, and again, putting out fire after fire after fire. And I can never get those years or those, weeks and months, especially those first couple precious months back. And I really regret that. And so again, I really regret that. I can't get it back, but that's the reason that I created this program, is because I want to provide that comfort, that direction, that guidance, all of the resources so that nobody else has to go through that. Because, like I said, I was really lucky in my marriage, at least. Again, I can never get those newborn days back with my son, but we made it out, and my husband and I are better than ever. We're so happy that we were able to sell our business and move on to the next chapter. And again, we almost didn't. So again, that's my kind of answer to the question that I get is, I don't want to work 24/7. I don't want it to cause issues with my kids or with my spouse. It will, if you have pre-existing issues. It will amplify that by 100, maybe even more than 100 times what you have going on. But like I said, it doesn't have to be that way. So either, go to therapy, invest in learning from somebody who went before you, and just know that, again, it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be a struggle. It doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to cause tension or stress or anything like that. But it will if you let it. So I hope that was really helpful. If you have any follow-up questions, feel free to message me on Instagram, email me. I'm always here. I'm an open book, as you can see. So I hope you enjoyed this little personal chat with me. And I will see you right back here with another business-related video. Bye, guys. Have a great day.